Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be talking about Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lembke. And this book was kind of interesting to read because I've been listening to a lot of neuroscientists like Huberman and people like that on how dopamine can have an effect on people. And I feel like I've been pursuing a lot of pleasure with, and I think I've noticed myself listening to a lot of music, and with music comes a lot of dopamine as well, I think. And then when you overdo that, you seem to have the crash, and which I've noticed clearly. And especially when you wear your noise cancelling headphones, in my personal experience, and when you take it off, it just feels like the world is coming apart. And so I was just going on this rabbit hole, and then I found this book, and I was like, okay, let me see some scientific backing to these kind of concepts. And so the book starts about talking about the pursuit of pleasure, basically, which people seem to optimize for dopamine, like the maximum amount of dopamine. So every time I would listen to music, I would find a certain kind of genre or a certain kind of music that really hits the spot, and then you would try to find perfect times where it just you just feel really good when you listen to certain kind of music with the noise cancelling headphones, basically. And then you just keep overdoing it, and then it's not enough after a certain point, and then after that you have to keep overdoing it again and again and again to get the same kind of thing, basically. And once you try to optimize for dopamine, it's just like a never ending bone that you're trying to catch. And and then the book actually had, basically, I was just trying to explain that with the pursuit of pleasure. And there was a lot of stories which were really grim, because I thought mine was worse, but seems like people have, like, the book basically just showcased the extremes of um, optimization of pleasure, basically. And and how they were struggling, and when she was treating people. And I was able to understand my own behaviors, actually. So when I would try to, like, put some corrective measures in place for my habits of listening to music, and with the pursuit of pleasure, basically. And she mentioned something called self-binding, which basically means where you just distance yourself from the actual thing that would cause the dopamine effect. Like, for example, people, if they were if like, for example, if I was really just listening to music a lot, and then I want to, like, fast from dopamine, do some dopamine fasting, basically. I would have to make sure that I get rid of my AirPods and lock it away, basically. And which would make it easy for me to just not be tempted and things like that. And also the book explains basically about how pleasure and pain have it was like a seesaw where there's like a fulcrum in between, and then when you push the seesaw on the side of pleasure, basically, what happens is that the body then, I think the word she used was, the body's made for equilibrium state or something like that, the exact word. So what the body basically does is that when you push the seesaw on the side of the pleasure, and then the body has to adjust it, so you're gonna feel the pain. That's exactly what I think. That's exactly why people feel really bad when they stop doing drugs, maybe, or stop drinking alcohol, or any kind of vice, basically. And also, I've noticed that, like, when I take my headphones off after listening to it for a long time, you just it's just you're not there. It's like you're just like lost because you can feel like the world is just like uncontrollably crashing, for me at least. And then when you seem to have this kind of um, routine, and even though when you the more pleasure you pursue, the more corrective measure the body has to take. So the it keeps increasing the more intense pleasure, the more intense pain for the is required to bring it back to equilibrium, basically. So uh, even though if you it takes a while for that, because the body is so used to giving the pain, it gets used to the corrective measures. So for the corrective measure to just like taper off, like you need to stop pursuing pleasure as well at the same time, which was so strange because it made me think like that's what I think that's I think she explains that that's why people have like at least two need at least 2 weeks to like completely recover from, so at least to go back to the, I think it was called the base state, I think. uh yeah. So and then she talks about how to integrate that part of yourself into the character itself. So uh it was like you have to be honest basically, and which I think is important for people with extreme problems. And there's something called pro-social shame. uh so which is basically where you say you have a problem, and then you explain to someone, and then there seems to be a reassurance. Oh, okay, don't worry, people are still there for you, blah blah blah, something like that. Because if people don't seem to accept that part of you, I think people just, it seems like people just go back into their old habits because they can't really integrate that within themselves. And it was interesting because I think the example she gave was when a woman with certain kind of vice was trying to get help from a church, but she couldn't find proper help because they didn't know how to handle it themselves, and they were trying to just be like, oh, just keep praying, because it certainly didn't address the problem that she was having. And then um, there was I th- the name for that was negative social shame or something. And then the pro social shame would be for like alcohol anonymous was the example, where people would actually talk about it and be like, oh, that's okay. And when you start hearing people with worse problems, and then you feel like you're not the only one having that problem basically. And so contrary to what she told earlier, where your body seems to add a lot of pain to just balance out the pleasure, so the alternate happens as well. So when people press on the side of pain, on the seesaw basically, if they impose a lot of pain for the body, it seems to have a corrective measure the other way around. So it's like the body tries to give a lot of pleasure to bring it back to equilibrium. And it seems to be a good coincidence where there's a comeback of cold showers these days. And even the book mentions about the cold showers. So it makes sense that people like uh, David Goggins, Wim Hof, Wim Hof, Daniel Wim Hof, or some people, those kind of people who take everything to the extreme side of pain, where apparently like addicts get a good amount of like dopamine that is well deserved, basically. And the book really talks about that. And overall, it's a really, really good book. I think if anyone wants to have an understanding about what about a vice that they don't want to have a routine with, they should probably read this book to see just like it's like a guide basically. You just understand the mechanisms that is in place within you, so you have a good idea of how to deal with it, I think. But yeah, overall, it was a good book, and thank you for watching.